Okay, I want to call the March 21st meeting of the ONWASA Board of Directors in order. I'd first like to introduce Mr. Tim Foster, our newest member, County Commissioner. We're glad to have you aboard.
Thank you.
And look forward to working with you.
Appreciate it.
If you would, bow for invocation. Most gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for another day. Lord, thank you for letting us live in a country that gives us the freedom to meet like this and make decisions for ourselves. But let's always be mindful that freedom is not free, and we need to always think about those that are fighting for our freedom. Lord, we thank you for every day you give us. You're an awesome God, and we appreciate the rights we have. Lord, watch over us as we go in this meeting. Help us to do the best work we can for ONWASA. Be with our employees as they go about their daily tasks. Take care of us when we leave here. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Would stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Laura, will you lead it?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, please turn off all cell phones and put them on vibrate. Individuals making presentations or public comments are asked to adjust the mic as necessary and speak directly into the microphone. This meeting is being recorded. First item is motion to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any further? All in favor?
Aye.
Next item is approval of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move for adoption of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right. Okay. First item will be our financial report. Ms. Tiffany.
The annual audit for fiscal year 2018 has been completed. At the exact time that we were to complete the audit, we were hit with Hurricane Florence and an attack on our computer infrastructure by criminals. RSM's understanding and patience was greatly appreciated by ONWASA and especially the finance staff. They went above and beyond their normal level of service by assisting in the completion of necessary documents while our computer system was down. Tonight, Mr. Robbie Bittner with RSM is here to present the audit for fiscal year 2017-2018.
Thank you, Tiffany. Members of the board, first, Can you hear me now? There we go. Alrighty. Thank you very much for allowing us to continue to serve on Wasa. It is always a pleasure, and we really do enjoy it. Also, thank you, Tiffany, to you and your staff for always being very responsive to our requests, despite the difficulties this year related to the hurricane and the crypto attack. As auditors, we audited the Wasa under two sets of auditing standards, both the generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. So we have issued two separate reports. The first is our opinion on fair treatment of your financial statements in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And the second report we issued was our assessment of your compliance and internal controls in accordance with government auditing standards. So I'm happy to say that the WASA did receive what we consider an unmodified opinion. An unmodified opinion is our highest level of assurance that we can provide as auditors. We issue four types of opinions. We can either disclaim an opinion, or we render no opinion. We can issue an adverse opinion, where we believe your financial statements are not fairly stated in accordance with GAAP. We can issue an modified opinion, which is sort of a but-for section type of opinion, where we believe your financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with GAAP, except for this part, or the unmodified, the highest level we can provide. So the authority did receive an unmodified opinion. Also, we issue every year, as required by Statement of Auditing Standards number 114, our required communications to those charged with governance. I believe you have received a copy. It is our SAS 114, or currently known as AUC 260 letter. There's just a few items in here I'd like to highlight. First, we did not have any disagreements with management this year. I don't think we've ever had a disagreement with management in the many years that we've been performing the audit. However, one of the most important parts of our audit this year, and for the ONWASA, for the authority itself, was the implementation of GASB Statement number 75. GASB Statement number 75 required that the authority fully recognize 100% of their actuarially determined other post-employment benefit obligation. That resulted in a beginning balance adjustment or restatement of net position of $2.4 million. While this is not cash out the door, this just is recognizing a liability that had previously only been disclosed in the financial statements in the footnotes. Statement number 75 required that those be brought to the front face of the financial statements. Additionally, we also reported one significant deficiency in our internal control and compliance report. That significant deficiency was related to a timing issue on the unbilled usage. We do not believe there to be any major issues related to that, and the situation has been addressed by management. That was reported in your compliance section of your financial report. So with that, it's kind of a slow year. There was no single audit this year since there were no federal grants in excess of $750,000 this year. So be glad to take any questions if you have any.
No questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for allowing us to continue to serve.
Okay, is there a motion to accept the comprehensive annual financial report?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, next item, Northwest Water Reclamation Facility, long-term hazard mitigation alternatives and potential funding opportunities. Mr. Moore?
Members of the Board of Directors, good evening. As noted in the agenda for this meeting, ONWASA staff have been working with representatives from W.K. Dixon and Company on not only flood recovery efforts at the Northwest plant, but also in developing and implementing what are called hazard mitigation improvements that would lessen or eliminate impacts to plant operations caused by similar events in the future. we're trying to plan ahead and make sure we don't have the same issues crop up. Key staff from both parties held a workshop in December 2018 to discuss goals for such an effort and potential actions to achieve the goals. This resulted in the creation of a document with kind of a long name, the Technical Memorandum on Long-Term Mitigation Alternatives. A copy was included in your agenda packet. Tonight, I've asked staff from WK Dixon to come and present information on the recommendations in the Technical Memorandum and possible avenues to secure funding to complete some of these improvements. These are things that are above and beyond actually just repairing the plant, but I say try to make it better and prevent loss in the future. Two people are here tonight, Jim Holland, project manager, who's addressed the board before on other issues, and Angela Metlin. She's Director of Strategic Funding and Regulatory Affairs. Works WK Dixon, has been very instrumental in looking at possible funding sources for the things we want to do. So I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Holland to give a short presentation on the technical memorandum.
All right. Thank y'all for allowing us to come speak on this. Like I said, this has been an ongoing process since this hit last September, and so this is kind of the culmination of a couple of things that we've done. As Mr. Moore had stated, we had actually had a workshop back in December, and we had identified some goals that we wanted to accomplish with this long-term mitigation effort. We wanted to minimize any future unexpected costs or losses at the plant due to catastrophic flooding. Where we basically were with this existing flood, we got to about the 500-year floodplain elevation. So that's where we identified as we want to set that flood elevation at the 500-year elevation. So that's what we've done. We wanted to have the ability to restart the plant once we got access to the plant within 2 days of being back to a 30-30 limit, which is a semi-well treated effluent, and within a week to be back under full permit compliance. We also wanted to have continued full operational compliance at the plant without any outside support once full wastewater treatment plant was restored. Some of the alternatives that we actually looked at for the long-term effects, we took a look at six different alternatives. One of them being enclosing the entire plant site with an earthen berm, and then with each one of these alternatives, we took a look at each pros and cons of each one of these, and that helped us with our evaluation. But the first one was an earthen berm that surrounded the plant. The second alternative was we were going to put a flood wall, like a combination of a concrete and metal flood panel wall around the plant to enclose the plant and keep flood waters out. Some of the issues that arose with those was if we put a wall around it, then we have to worry about every time it rains, the water that gets captured inside the plant. The third alternative we looked at doing was actually enclosing all the critical components with flood walls around just particular components. This one we found that didn't meet all of the critical criteria that we had said. The electrical building, by just putting a wall around it, it still allowed flood water to get in through the electrical building, through the electrical manholes. The fourth alternative we looked at was just elevating a lot of just the mechanical components, the pumps, the blowers, motors, and that kind of thing. We looked to just elevate those to get those up out of the floodplain. Some things that were issues or concerns there is as we raise equipment now from a maintenance perspective, we were going to have to build catwalks and some other things around those, which made it not very likely. Our fifth alternative, we looked at a combination of some elevation and enclosing of equipment. We looked at elevating the electrical building, which was one of our big components that happened with the flood. Was once the electrical building flooded, we couldn't get power to any of the components of the plant. And looked at enclosing certain components that were critical to maintaining plant operation during a storm. And the last alternative we looked at was relocating the electrical building and elevating a combination of a bunch of things as well too. We run into some issues and conditions with that as well. Through the evaluation of all those alternatives, like I said, we didn't end up picking the most cost-effective alternative. But there was, like I said, one alternative three didn't even meet all the criteria. Alternative one was actually a cheaper alternative, but it's going to cost you more in maintenance at the end of the day. But the alternative we selected was 5, which was a combination of raising the electrical building basically where it is and putting some flood walls around critical components, not all components, just what we have identified as critical components to maintain plant operation. It includes, like I said, the electrical building, raising electrical building and generator, and constructing a flood-proof building around the blowers and the transfer pumps at the influent, going to the SBRs, the SBR jet motive pumps, and the waste pump station and the post EQ basin. If these would have been in place during this last storm, we could have actually continued operation of the plant. Wouldn't have had the issues that we actually had at the plant. The cost estimate for all of this is about $3.325 million for all of that installation. This is just a map basically showing the plant of what we were looking at. I guess the pointer don't work. But that puts all critical components. It would take care of those components and would allow for the plant operation. In an event of another event like this one occurred, we could still maintain plant operation. So what are our next steps? And I guess I'll stop. Questions at this point? Anybody have any questions at this point?
Wiring from the main electrical station, is that underground wiring going to all the,
Yes, sir. That's all underground wiring that's going from the main motor control center to each piece of equipment.
and we're sure that all that wiring is watertight?
We are going back. That's part of some of the stuff we're doing from the immediate responses. We're actually going to replace all that wiring. So, and as we're replacing and repulling that wire, and we're going to make sure those manholes are tight at that point. So what are our next steps? Now that we've identified what's the best alternative to do, we're going to meet with state regulators and that kind of thing to make sure nobody has any issues with anything there we see we're going to do. We actually had planned to do that with some workshops previous to this, and now that we've identified this, that's sort of the next step. Angie will talk to you in just a second, but we're also going to schedule meetings with some funding opportunities. How can we get some funding for this? And she'll go into some detail on that in just a minute as well. And once we have that accomplished, we would then come back to the board for final approval on making sure we kind of get all this taken care of. And at that point, once your approval, we'll start the design components to get all of this stuff in place. And then from there, we'll go to implement the improvements. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Angie.
As they indicated, my name is Angie Metlin. One of the things, just kind of backtrack just a little bit, as we look through each of these alternatives, one of the critical items that we looked at with each of these alternatives were the pros and cons from everything from permitting to long-term operation and maintenance, but we also looked at funding, at what the funders, what we thought the different funding agencies would participate in based on each of those alternatives. So that was one of the factors and one of the considerations that led us to Alternative 5. Alternative 5 was one of the two alternatives that offered, in our opinion, based on what we know right now, and it's a little bit fluid. It seems to change every day, but based on what we know right now, option 5 offers you the most opportunity to seek the most funding from the most sources. So with that, let me just talk a little bit about those probable funding sources. You'll notice up here that a lot of these are federal programs. EDA, USDA, all of those we are expecting that there's going to be some disaster recovery money in the budget now that Congress and the President have agreed to move on. However, what we don't know is they're still working through the details, and we know the devil is in the details based on the funding for the wall and all of that, how much actually comes down through those programs for disaster recovery. The hazard mitigation program, there are two sections of that under the Stafford Act, 404 and 406. We are currently working through the 406 program, which is the direct public assistance. And through that program, we can institute hazard mitigation through that program. That is the easiest process for us to use, and that's what we're doing. But we're waiting on FEMA. We are working through that process with FEMA. But we are including mitigation pieces in our information to FEMA so we can get that included. The 404 section is a state-run program, and each state handles it differently. North Carolina, they tier their $404, and the first tier is for property acquisition, and they're pretty sure that all of their 404 hazard mitigation money is going to be spent in acquiring flooded properties in North Carolina. So the best bet is for us to continue to working through FEMA. The other option is state disaster funds, and that's one of the ones I want to focus a little bit on. Is the Golden Leaf Foundation is the nonprofit entity that the state has chosen in Matthew and now in Florence again to get out state appropriated money. They currently have the first round of money appropriated to them, and it was to deal with direct immediate repairs. However, due to the process with FEMA taking a long time, they have used very little of that money. And they've also recognized that there are some repairs that mitigation makes sense to do it makes sense to do the mitigation with the immediate repair, not to come back later and do it. So they are allowing us to go ahead and submit applications as we're still working through the FEMA process. They will front fund that money, and then when FEMA comes in and pays their part, you just reimburse Golden Leaf for what you get from FEMA, basically. The other opportunity is the Division of Water Infrastructure at DEQ also received money from the legislature during Matthew, and we expect that they might receive some as well. However, they have other programs that will fund improvements to infrastructure facilities, and that's one of the reasons why this particular alternative fits well with that one. In particular, we do expect there to be more money coming in from the state appropriations for Division of Water Infrastructure and for Golden Leaf in the future. But right now we've got a golden opportunity, play on words, with Golden Leaf to go ahead. We've got a particular component in Alternative 5 that meets that definition of being able to do mitigation work as we do the repairs, and that's the electrical building, doing the elevation of that electrical building while we're doing the repairs. It doesn't make sense to do everything and then come back and raise it. So they have basically given us the green light to submit for that piece of it right now, and so that's part of what we're doing. And then we will continue to look at other opportunities, but I will tell you, based on that cost estimate, we may get half of that covered, and the other half may be covered through FEMA as well as through your insurance. So we could check off all the boxes and all the funding needed for Alternative 5 pretty quickly. So when I had the discussion, because I've been keeping in contact with these funders, when I had the discussion with them on Tuesday morning, we discussed this opportunity. So any questions about the funding?
I have a question. Is there any time limit that you have to pay back that initial dollars? Because FEMA could take years.
That's right. No, then they understand that.
Okay.
Golden Leaf understands that. That's one of the reasons why they have been willing to do this, is they're hearing this across the board, that it's taking much longer post-Florence than it did post-Matthew. So
And they don't charge any interest or anything on the
it's
money?
it's all grant,
Okay.
complete grant dollars. So, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I have one question. It's on, okay. So I have one question.
Sure.
If you would answer. Alternative 5, the estimated opinion of probable cost is $3.3 million.
That's correct.
When we've been talking with FEMA, their cost-benefit analysis kicks in if it's over the one-to-one from the initial damage.
Right.
So could you kind of explore that for a moment, since our estimate of initial damage is in the $5 million range, and option 5 is at 3.3? So
from the FEMA standpoint, they're going to look at, the BCA is one thing that they look at, but so when we did the mitigation workshop, that electrical building in and of itself was one of the single most costly impacts that you guys had. So I think those initial, just to repair it, was about $1.2, $1.3 million, maybe a little bit more than that. So they will look at that and then add to it for the mitigation piece of it. Basically, they know that if it happens again, we're going to spend, and everything stays, we return it to pre-storm condition, and it stays like that, then we could be looking at another $1.5 million right off the bat. So spending on top of that 1.5, another 1.2, or another $1 million makes sense. It's less than that 50%. So yeah. So that's what they'll look at. But our goal is if we can get the combination between FEMA and Golden Leaf, it may not even get into that level of detail. So, yeah.
Guess we received the information, so is there a motion motion to direct staff and ONWASA consultants to take Dixon to proceed with the application of the Golden Leaf Foundation for Northwest Plant
So moved.
mitigation funding? For second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item. Thank y'all for information in your work. Ms. Joetta?
Good evening. Good evening. ONWASA's current personnel policy was adopted by the Board of Directors on April 17, 2014. Realizing the need to update the policy manual to ensure compatibility with changing state and federal laws, as well as the changing workplace, the Human Resources team initiated a complete review of the manual in 2018. We then staffed the draft through ONWASA's leadership team and attorney, Mr. Chuck Kitchen. All recommended policy changes were considered and incorporated as appropriate prior to submitting the policy manual draft to the Board of Directors for review and comment. Several director comments and further attorney recommended changes were received and incorporated into the draft policy manual before you. Do you have any questions about the manual? Okay. The action requested this evening is that the board consider a motion to adopt the revised ONWASA personnel policy.
So moved. I'll second it, whatever.
Okay.
Question. It's a rather lengthy document and very comprehensive. Compliment you and the staff for all the work putting that together.
Thank you.
I reviewed that as best I could, and the thought occurred to me in terms of the employees. There's a lot of information in there to digest. And what are your plans for educating the employees about the plan so that you will gain their conformity to the issues and policies?
Okay, first, what we will do is we will definitely provide a paper copy to every employee along with the material revisions of the policy manual. We will also train our supervisors and department heads on the manual so that they will be informed as well. So that's how we plan to move forward. And the manual will also, at any time, they can speak to their supervisor, department head, or contact Human Resources for information. We also will put it on our HR portal, which is an intranet, that they will have access to the information at any time. So first, getting it out there to them so that they can review it, and if they have any questions, of course.
Do you think that a water meter or any other position is going to take the time to read a 80-page document or so?
Well,
and understand it?
One thing is by providing them the revisions list, the material revisions list, that is one thing, but we will actually inform them, and we can do meetings to discuss the manual with them as well, which is a very good idea to do.
I would hope so.
I'm sorry.
Anything else from the board? It's been a motion made and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Carried. Good work. Okay. note, is there anyone to address?
A lot of work.
Nobody? Okay. Okay.
I think I have my copy.
Mr. Executive Director, your comments?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'd like to talk just briefly about three things. The first is a partnership that we have ongoing with our volunteer fire departments in the community, specifically the rural areas of Onslow County and areas outside the city of Jacksonville and Marine Corps Base Camp Lejeune. Recently, we were able to partner with the Fire Chiefs Association, and ONWASA purchased about 3,700 durable bands to go around our fire hydrants. In the past, ONWASA had been purchasing paint, and the paint was given to our fire departments, and they would go out and paint and repaint the hydrants. The top of the hydrant indicates flow to fire departments. Well, there's a better solution that saves time and money, and that is a durable plastic band. The hydrants are property of ONWASA. It's always been a partnership between ONWASA and the fire departments, but instead of going out with 5 different colors of paint plus red and white to depict different flow rates, 16 different volunteer fire departments have been given 3,700 bands, and so they're going out, and so around the community now, out in the county, you'll see a banded fire hydrant that will depict flow. The bands last longer than the paint at the top of the fire hydrant. They're reflective at night. Not all the paint is, and the fire departments chose that as their best solution scenario. It also gets us out of buying a whole lot of different color paint. So fire hydrants will be a uniform red with various color bands around them. So we're pleased that we have that partnership with the volunteer fire departments. Earlier tonight, you heard an update, of course, and took action on our resiliency at the Northwest plant. And we also talked a little bit about FEMA. I'd like to just mention a couple of things about FEMA and an update to the board and the public. ONWASA submitted 20 projects at an estimated value of $6.5 million for FEMA review and approval. And of course, there's been some FEMA delay, naturally, with the government shutdown, but they are still reviewing our projects. The Northwest Regional Water Reclamation Facility damages were around $5.4 million of that total estimate. The remaining $1.1 million was mostly comprised of generator run times, overtime, supplies, materials, equipment cost, and costs associated with the repair assistance received from the City of Raleigh, City of Wilson, and Greenville utilities. We were very thankful to have assistance from our sister utilities across the state, but of course, just as we were reimbursed for responding to Hurricane Irma in Florida, we reimbursed them, and FEMA reimburses us. So we're processing all of that through FEMA right now. One interesting note, it's incredibly important for us to continue our resiliency efforts. In fact, today I was at a meeting, in fact, Director Bennett was there as well, and it was brought up several times that living on the eastern coast of North Carolina, we need to improve our hurricane resiliency. So there are a number of things that we're doing. I want to touch on a couple of those. But one thing that was critical during Florence was our generators at our different well sites. We have good numbers now. These are numbers that were reported to FEMA for reimbursement. Our generators ran approximately 8,736 hours during the time that commercial power was off. That is resulting in and this is subject to review and FEMA approval, but it's resulting in a claim amount to FEMA of $402,268.82. Now, those are efforts that ONWASA had in place, those different generators when Florence hit. But we're currently learning from our most recent experience and doing other things as well. So lastly, I'd like to talk just a moment about storm resiliency and some of the things that we're doing. First of all, we have dozens upon dozens of stream crossings in Onslow County. One thing that we're talking with hazard mitigation officials about is the replacement of the above stream in the air pipes with underground borings that will allow our water mains to at stream crossing locations, dip underground and be protected from trees, etc. I found it interesting that you don't even have to have a hurricane to have aerial crossings in jeopardy. Mr. Matt Padgett's crews responded just 3 weeks ago, I believe 3 to 4 weeks ago, to a situation where there was a wreck. And the car apparently went, well, it went airborne, it went some way, Mr. Padgett, and it ended up on top of one of our aerial crossings. And the fire department called us out because when you have a car resting on top of a large aerial crossing, you might want the utility company to come out and help. So those are areas that we have some vulnerability that we might want to address. Although only 2 of our many stream crossings were directly impacted and damaged by the storm, the vulnerability level is much, much greater than that. And had this been a slightly different storm, we could have seen dozens or some number greater than 2 of aerial crossings in jeopardy. Secondly, we did have all of those generators. They ran all of that time, but one thing that we realized is if your roads are flooded, you're not going to get gasoline or diesel to the generators. So we are in the process of looking at increased generator fuel supply size, the tanks in operation at those generators. Along with different tanks at the generators, larger tanks at the generators, we're also exploring costing out what's called a diesel fuel finisher. We had a good partnership with the Onslow County School System. They have a lot of number 2 diesel fuel in tanks that's normally used for heating. Well, in an emergency, we could pull that and use it for generator fuel. In fact, we used a lot of diesel from the school system, but from the bus garage, not yet from the heating fuel tanks. We didn't get to that point. But you can take a diesel fuel finisher and take old diesel fuel, make sure there's no water in it, pass it through this machine, and when it comes out to fuel your generator or to fill up the tanker to go to your generator, it's not going to mess up your generator. Certainly, we're looking at our roof situation. That was also something that was brought up today, a vulnerability throughout the county, the types of roofs that we have. It's a particular thing that we're worried and concerned about at the main office on Georgetown Road. Where our main operations, our main server rooms are at, is the condition of the roof and the vulnerability there. The stock and supply of key parts. We maintain water lines of all sizes on our stock, in our stockyard. But during a hurricane or around hurricane season, we might want to beef up the amount of supplies we have on hand and then dwindle that down through the year if we don't have a hurricane, but we might want to have just a few more things on hand. Contract for immediate assistance. It is our full intention that at your May Board of Directors meeting, we will have bid out and gotten a bid back on an emergency contract, not to be utilized unless there's actually a hurricane. But in the event of a hurricane, just like the county, Onslow County government does and the city of Jacksonville for debris removal, you're not paying an annual payment for debris removal, but if you have a hurricane, you already have a FEMA-approved document in place that allows you to hit the big red button, and all those trucks came to get the debris. Well, we would have a contract in place on a linear footage count, so per 1,000 linear feet of 4-inch, 6-inch, 8-inch, 12-inch, fire hydrant, service connection, have unit pricing that we would have bid out and have a company that had gone through our regular procurement processes that would be approved by FEMA, that we could then hit a big red button, and in the event of a catastrophic disaster, we could have that help come. Now, that help would not come until we had already exhausted what we used in this storm, the North Carolina Water and Wastewater Agency Response Network. So our sister utilities are always the first line of assistance, other than, well, our own employees. Our own employees, our sister utilities, we work very well with the city of Jacksonville. They helped us out, and we helped them. So those agencies, and then a contract. Flood-proofing the plants you've already heard about. Employee training. You can buy all the stuff, but if your employees don't know what to do, from damage documentation to response efforts to communication, then you're still going to be in a jam. So we have once again scheduled a massive hurricane drill, if you will, for the month of May. We'll be engaging multiple departments in what they would do in preparation for a hypothetical hurricane. I play Skip Waters. I send out NOAA information a week or two in advance. Hey, there's a tropical wave that just came off the coast of Africa. You might want to watch this. A couple days later, hey, we've had a tropical front that's formed. A couple days later, we've got a hurricane that's built up. And all along the way, our departments know and our leadership team knows the things that they're supposed to be doing leading up to landfall, and then immediately following landfall, which is the day of our exercise, and that's when our damage assessment teams roll out into the community. IT resiliency. We know that it's not just about pipes, it's also about computers. So having IT resiliency from our SCADA system and from our computer networks is something that we're also working on. Also, well protection of the wells itself. We know now that we lost some large amount of water when some electronic valves at well sites, when they lost commercial power, and then when we lost generator power because we weren't able to refuel, some of the valves were not closed all the way. And water, being what water is, tries to go down. So our water in our system, we recharged our own aquifers in a couple of instances when the water came back, when we had valve failures. Our own staff are installing right now mechanical weighted arm check valves that do not rely on any power source. And so we're putting them in ourselves, and in the case of a power failure, and when water stops coming up, that weighted device slams down and it shuts the system off from draining back down into the aquifers. So we know we identified that, and we're already working on that solution. And finally, one thing that once again looks back toward this evening's meeting that's also very important, and that's maintaining a healthy fund balance. You cannot count on FEMA to come in the day after the storm with a really big check. And so I'd like to commend all of our employees, certainly, but also the finance office for their work in maintaining a good, healthy fund balance and reserves so that we can deal with these emergencies internally, initially after a hurricane, to give us time to get Ms. Metlin out here and tell us all of the wonderful millions of dollars that she's promised us that we will be getting from all the federal sources. So it's a good, clean audit. And one thing I would draw your attention to, if you want to review the audit just one more time, take a look at the net position of ONWASA. The net position of ONWASA has increased by over $5 million. And once again, that's a testament to our own staff and also, of course, the private sector entities that have been installing hard infrastructure that's then turned over to ONWASA. It's not all liquid assets, it's hard assets as well. But directors, you have a good, solid water utility here. And I thank all my staff for the hard work that they've done on mitigation and these activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Seth. That was a good report. I think the drill you did prior to Florence helped out a lot too, because I'm sure you learned a lot, but we could never expect what we had to happen. So it was good to have that drill prior to that too. So, okay, comments from director. I'm gonna start down here with our new one. Any comments from you, sir?
Just glad to be here. A lot of information I've read and looked back on the Florence, and it's impressive of what this authority has done and the things that you have in place and the people that are out there every day taking care of it. And just be able to keep something running of that nature. The folks that have those lines running to their homes do not understand, I don't think, the work that has to be done on the front to ensure that the day after a hurricane or some natural disaster, they still have water coming to them and they're in a safe situation. So my hat's off to what I've learned the last couple of weeks leading up to this. And Mr. Hudson, that goes to you and to your staff for that work. Very impressive.
Thank you. Ms. Turner?
And I agree with that, Mr. Hudson and the staff. You've done a remarkable job. There's nothing else to say but remarkable. And Joetta, you did a wonderful job on the personnel policy manual. I know for a fact it's not easy to do that. So I commend you for the work that you did on that. It was very well done. Thank you.
Mr. Bittner?
No comment.
Mr. Connor?
Nothing at this time.
Mr. Bennett?
Yeah, thanks again, and the policy manual was very realistic, difficult to read, a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work, and I appreciate what you guys did for it, and hope you have a good night.
Jeff, I have a question in regards to the generators. Have we looked at the opportunity for natural gas lines along any of those routes?
Director Lazar, there are some locations that we might be able to tie into natural gas,
'Cause that's-
depending on where the line is versus the generator.
Yeah.
And we've actually talked about the fact that propane and natural gas might be a cleaner burning fuel than diesel, and we wouldn't have to worry about
Filling.
the filling it, and also the gelling of diesel fuel, number 2 diesel, if we're not able to turn it over or treat it, which the fuel finisher would help. Unfortunately, a lot of our well sites are in very remote locations, and so that would have a pretty small application, unless we went with propane
Right.
and
Something to
individual tanks.
consider. I know that at the college, which we have natural gas, we're looking at that, which gives you an endless fuel supply and you don't have to worry about refill. I didn't know if any along the routes that you may have some sites that may be a better choice for that location rather than the other, but
Yes, sir.
that's all I
Okay,
know.
yeah, you did give us a lot of reading to do, and I thank Heather for getting my iPad back up and running. I had a lot of reading there too I didn't know I had. So I appreciate everything. We got the best staff in the world, and I appreciate everything all y'all do. And even our attorney, I think we got the best attorney around too, so I appreciate him. So, okay.
There goes the rates.
Our next item, we're going to be having a closed session. Is there a motion to go into closed session pursuant to NCGS 143-1? Okay. Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay. No action taken. Anything else from any of the directors? All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank y'all.